Hello, good morning. Let me introduce myself. My name is Antonio Cortijo. I'm a professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara. And I also want to begin by thanking Professor Vicente Martinez for his kindness in inviting me to deliver this online presentation to all of you on the topic of why study a PhD, why pursue further academic studies, what is the relevance, what is the importance of doing that, and what are some of the advantages that one can expect in doing so. I'm going to try to be very practical in my presentation, and I'm going to point out that some of the issues that I think that are involved in studying a PhD. I think we have to start by mentioning the fact that furthering your studies, going beyond a bachelor's degree, either in the pursuit of a master's or in the pursuit of a PhD, it's always welcome news. As human beings, we need we have the need to know, the need to know deeper, the need to in-depth knowing, and that is definitely done nowadays. It's always been done that way, but nowadays, it's definitely done, in what here in the US we call graduate education, grad studies, either involving a master's or involving a PhD. There's a dictum here, it's common knowledge in the US, and I think it also applies, to most countries in Europe. A bachelor's degree, so what you call in Spain a grado, the 3 or the 4 year degree, bachelor's degree that you obtain in any university has become what a high school diploma used to be. So it's a starting point, I would say. People used to receive and used to get a bachelor's degree, and the bachelor's degree represented something like, I don't know, it's close to 95% of what people, the degree that people obtain at university. Only maybe 5% of the population went into pursuing either master's or a PhD. I believe the PhD was pursued only by 1% of the population. And also, one has to take into consideration, at least in the US, that most of the masters were obtained through what we call a professional degree, or a professional master's, be it either an MBA or a law degree, considering that a law degree, here in the U.S., is considered grad studies. It's something that you do, after you obtain your bachelor's degree. The third one, of course, was medicine. So the situation, has definitely changed, I would say, in the last 20, 30 years. And there is a need, for furthering your studies. In Europe, that is done most of the time, through the study of masters, which usually take between 1 and 2 years. In Spain, which is, the place that I know the most, there's a huge abundance of those masters that, basically take 1 year. The whole point that I wanted to make is that for the contemporary job market, it is not enough, and let me emphasize that it is just not enough to have a bachelor's degree, period. For furthering your career, so I'm just talking, in practical terms, it is absolutely crucial, it is absolutely important that you pursue further education into grad studies. Now, grad studies can also be very, very, very important, in themselves. It is not just a question of prolonging the time that you have to be in university, although, definitely there's a factor in many countries in which, different governments, want to pump up the statistics of unemployment by considering that all those people that continue studying, are actually not unemployed, or technically, employed. But anyway, those are practicalities of contemporary life and politics, and we shouldn't get, into that topic. But the most important thing, is that the bachelor's degree, nowadays provides you, to some degree, a very basic approach to your field of studies. It is, what here in the U.S. and in North America we call the requirements of general education. The requirements of general education. So what I mean is that, at least here, when you study a degree, you have to fulfill some credits that apply to the specific major of studies that you choose, but then you also have to fulfill some general education requirements that are called GEs. To some extent, that also happens in Europe. You have some subjects that are compulsory, and then you have some other ones that are optional. So it would be something similar and equivalent. But the whole point I'm trying to make is that during your degree, you're going to have access to a very basic type of information and preparation. So it is only in your grad studies when you're going to have to develop, well, number one, more critical thinking. Number two, you're going to have to develop more in-depth knowledge of problems, and you're going to have to be tackling some of the real issues that are involved in the profession that you are to choose. That is definitely, the benefit of from an intellectual point of view, the main benefit, of grad studies. So it's going to put you much closer to your field of work. It's going to provide you a better view and a better overview of the field. Hopefully, if those studies are what they're supposed to be, they're going to put you in contact with people that are very knowledgeable about that field, that to some extent, are going to have hands-on and a hands-on approach to that field, and they're going to become, the transition that you're going to have, between the general education that you received during your bachelor's degree, during the time that you were studying, undergraduate education, and the moment when you're getting very ready, to enter the job force. Of course, in many other cases and in many other occasions, the pursuit of further grad studies is done actually the other way around. There's some people that have entered the job market, and once they enter the job market in many different professions, education, for instance, is one of them. Social work, for instance, is another one. But then you have many more. You have, economics. You have to some extent, some branches of law. So once people enter the job market, that's when they realize that they need further specialization. Things, shouldn't, if things were working properly, things, shouldn't be that way, because the university, the main purpose of the university would be to prepare students to enter the job force. We all know that, regretfully, that doesn't happen, and so it's only when after you enter the workforce when you realize, what are the lacks, what are the things that you're lacking, and that would need, further studying on your part. That's also crucial. That's also a very crucial aspect of grad studies. So for many people, in conjunction with their companies, with the companies that they're working for, or the government, if they're working, in the administrative section of the government, they realize that they can further their professional opportunities actually by pursuing very specific types of grad studies. Be that as it may, either because you want to acquire, a deeper knowledge of your field, or because, already in the, being in the workforce, you realize that it's good for your professional future, to go back to grad school. The main point of that grad school, from a theoretical point of view, is that it's going to allow you, as I was saying before, it's going to allow you to tackle problems more in depth than you did in undergraduate studies, and it's going to allow you to have, a very full overview of your field. grad studies are supposed to be, project oriented. You're supposed, to be developing a very particular line of work, and you're supposed, to work towards a project that, depending on your field, is supposed to be done either by you exclusively or in conjunction, with other people. So we can go into, I don't know, many different fields. In the field of psychology, theoretical psychology, for instance, you're going to be working together with a group of researchers. You're never going to be working, alone. You're going to be working, in a lab. You're going to be joining, a professor that has developed, a line of research, and you kind of join in. You kind of enter a group. You don't work by yourself. If you work in the humanities, are much more individualistic. So you're going to work under the guidance of a professor who is going to be kind of like a mentor or a tutor or a reader, a careful, critical reader of your work. But then you're going to be working on your own. You're going to be developing, all your studies, entirely on your own. But again, the main purpose of grad studies, at this level is going to be knowledge. It's not just information, which is the main point of undergraduate studies, to provide you with information, to let you know what information is, to let you know where you can access and find information. It has to do much more with knowledge. It is about the way that you can impact society, depending on the field, psychology, education, many different options, and possibilities. But it's more, again, about knowledge. I would say, to add something else, that grad studies allow you to belong to a very reduced group of the population in terms of percentage. I mentioned before, at least here in the US, it's no more than 4%, the number of students that pursue, a master's or a PhD. It's going to allow you, to be part of a I don't want to use, elitist, but we could use, maybe the term directive, the people in charge of directing society, the people in charge of dealing with very important contemporary issues, the people that can affect, change regarding policy, the people that can have, like a practical input, the people that can belong to think tanks in political terms, even in economic terms, all those very active and proactive members of society that actually, have a say in how society is moving. All those are people that have gone definitely beyond an undergraduate degree and that have access grad studies. Grad studies, are also a difficult time, from a psychological point of view. So, it's not just to say that there's only advantages. No, it's complicated depending on the age when you enter, those grad studies, and it depends. Here in the US, it's closer to 30. I know that in Europe, it's a little before that. If people, are already in the job force and they come back, to university, they come back to grad studies, it's a little later, closer, to what is in the US, closer to 30, let's say, than to 23, which is the regular normal age when you finish, undergraduate studies. Anyway, grad studies, are a complicated moment from a psychological point of view. We know that the dropout rate for grad studies is worldwide is between 30 and 40%. That means that between 3 and 4 people out of 10 are going to end up dropping out of grad studies. Not everybody is cut out, for grad studies. Again, if we talk about psychology, and a lot of work has been done, in the field of educational psychology, studying, grad studies. One of the main important problems the first year of grad studies is what we call the imposter syndrome. As you enter grad studies, you enter together with a group of people that might be more advanced than you are. In the case of a PhD, you might enter a program and some students, are 4 or 5 years, ahead of you. So one of the first things that you feel, that you experience, is that you're not cut out for for the duties or the tasks, at hand. That somehow you tricked the system. That somehow, you were able to deceive the committee that accepted your application into grad studies, and you feel like an imposter. Of course, it's all about overcoming that feeling. It's only that, for most fields, there's a jargon that you use, especially in grad studies. There's a research jargon, there's a professional jargon, and of course, you're not cognizant of that jargon, at first, and it takes, a little time to adjust yourself, to your new reality. Number two, endurance. Endurance, is very difficult. It's going to be complicated to see people your age joining the workforce and, having families, getting married, having children, buying houses, and you're still studying, in grad studies. So it's a little difficult, to overcome that feeling of inadequacy. What am I doing here? Why am I not doing what most people my age, are doing, and I'm back in school? Well, you have to remember that 15 years down the road, you're going to be much better off than the people that didn't go into grad studies. Sometimes, even sooner, in many different fields. So the main point I'm trying to make is that it pays off. The little bit or the huge amount of sacrifice that you're going through, in grad studies definitely pays off. In the long run. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long run, yeah, it definitely does. So all this to say that there are some, I wouldn't say disadvantages, but complications, emotional and psychological complications. When dealing, with pursuing further education in a grad program. But anyway, I don't want to dwell in that. It's not even that important or relevant. It's only I'd say, interesting to mention it, just to let you know that those issues, are there, and they're well known, and in most universities there's usually psychological services that can help students, if they go through that process. So to sum it all up, I think I'm running out of time here. I would say that pursuing grad studies is a worthy activity. It's a worthy endeavor. There's a lot of rewards from an intellectual point of view in pursuing grad studies. There's a lot of professional, social rewards. Also, in doing so, you're going to be accessing better job opportunities. And in terms of general fulfillment of an individual that continues being attuned to intellectual progress, definitely is something to be encouraged. All this said, and be that as it may, we also have to remind students and people that there are some, I wouldn't say disadvantages, but there are some issues that need careful attention in terms of the psychological well-being of the grad student, and those ones, should also be taken into consideration. So anyway, that's what I had to say. Again, thank you very much for your attention, number one. Thank you very much, Professor Vicente Martinez, for inviting me to be here with you, and it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.